banking ahead. Konechny tips it. He got it past the defenseman and gets to the puck. Konechny cutting it on goal. He scored! A beauty from Konechny, and the Flyers take a 1-0 lead. Beat the defenseman, then beat the goaltender. And Konechny's third goal in the last 2 games has the Flyers on top.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Yeah, it's been a while, about 2 weeks. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast. It is episode number 167 as the Flyers are 15 games through the season now. And we got a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up at the new O&B studios located near Tampa, Florida. So, but don't worry, we're still in Philly with Chef B, and we got Dan Silver in DC. He's not with us tonight, but Chef B, you are. Just want to say hello there.
Yeah, Dan's catching the rains down in Africa. I know there's a song there somewhere, and I think I shared it with him before the show. So, but that's great. He looks like he's having a blast. He's got some great photos. It's a really awesome time. So really happy for him to get away and get to see the wife for a little bit. So, but we're going to talk about the games. Not a total loss. I know the record shows that, but I'll just leave it for the rest of the show. I'm looking forward to talking about this.
Yeah, you can catch Dan on Twitter at dsilver88, and he's running into hippos taking baths, all kinds of stuff. So check it out. It's really cool. And we look forward to having him back. But he's with his lovely wife, and we understand, that's for sure. But tonight we have a great guest we're going to get to. Just a reminder that the O&B Puckcast is on 12 podcast platforms and formats. We have a Facebook page. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and many other podcast platforms. We're no longer on SoundCloud. That's feedback that you kind of gave us. So, you can check us out on YouTube channel. Just plug in their O&B Puckcast. So get us. If you could follow, rate, and subscribe. When you subscribe to the O&B Puckcast, you move us up the charts because people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast, and it moves us up the charts. We do appreciate that. So without any further ado, from High and Wide Radio, he's with us. He's the man. He's playing hurt tonight. We appreciate it. Jim Iacovone, how you doing?
Doing great, Isaiah. Guys, thanks for having me on. It's always, whenever you ask me to come on, I always look forward to hanging out. It's always a good time. You guys are two of the best guys around, so I was happy to come on and hang out.
Yeah, appreciate it. And the feeling. Yeah, the feeling is mutual. You got a great thing going over there. You guys are really on top of what the Flyers are doing. You have some really great guests. And I think we do a lot of complimentary stuff if you listen to both of us on a regular basis. We got the old man take. We got the little younger set take. And it's pretty cool. So before we get into the Flyers, look, they're 7-6-2, but there's quite a disparity between how they started versus how they played. And the exact same thing. It's almost like the flip side of a record in terms of what the record is and how they played even most recently. And we'll get into that. But, Jim, while you're here, I wanted talk a little bit about something that myself and Dan Silver, when he gets back, and you have already been involved with, called the Flyers Pod Collective. And maybe you could tell the folks about some of the things you've been doing and what we hope to, move forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've started live streaming Flyers games on playback.tv between you, myself, and Dan Silver. We were able to we're working out the kinks right now until, you're settled in with your move and obviously when Dan comes back from Florida. But we were able to do a couple games. Our last one we did against St. Louis. What it is it's basically it's a room for Flyers fans to come out and watch a Flyers game on the internet. Obviously, we live stream the game. So if you don't have a stream for the game, if it's on a channel on TV that you don't get, because that's how things work these days for whatever reason, we're advancing in technology and you can watch the game in less places. But you'll have a stream. You'll have a place to watch the game on playback.tv. You'll just click the link. I don't even think, if you sign up, it doesn't cost any money. So it's free. You'll get a live stream for the game and you get to watch it with Flyers fans, with us. So if you can't make it out to a bar, you can't make it out to a game, and you want a place to hang out with fellow Flyers fans, there you go. You can hang out with us.
Absolutely. And the great thing is we can kind of give our commentary about certain situations, things. We can stay around the corner, coming like a bad shift. Like, okay, here comes a goal, a penalty, or they're going to need a great save or something like that. Or just our comments about what's really going on, kind of blowing over the hot air sometimes you get from national broadcasters or out-of-town broadcasters, because you get a lot of misinformation. They mean well, but you want a Flyers perspective. So, we look forward to kind of rolling that out very quickly. And, check that out. So that's playback.tv.
Yes, sir. Yep.
All right, great. So look forward to that. Check on our timelines and certainly on Jim's. And you're at Jim Ike HW.
Correct. Yep.
On Twitter. So check that out. Okay. So the Flyers, since we last spoke, have gone 2-4-1 over these 7 games. And overall, they started out winning it the first 5 of the first 7. And now they've lost 6 of their last 8. And, some of the process numbers we were warned about in terms, they're really not playing out well. They're getting outshot. The quality of the chances, they're getting bailed out by Carter Hart, who's playing out of his mind, or the power play that's working. They were indicative, however, of like a change. It's actually kind of reversed, because now a lot of the issues they warned us about with the team, some of them are still good. Some are going backwards, like the special teams, face-offs, turnovers have really hurt them. At the dot yesterday, they lost like 43 out of 58 face-offs. So, that's like 24%. That's horrendous. And now they're really missing guys like Couturier and they had Drew all those years. So, Jim, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of what's been happening recently versus how they were kind of getting by before, and now they're 7-6-2. That's kind of who they are.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Obviously, they started out, they surprised everybody. They started 4-1 and then improved to 5-2. Even the 2 overtime losses, 5-2-2. I think people were kind of like, all right, they're staying in games with teams like Carolina and New York. They could have beaten Carolina. But I think, things kind of have a way of evening out. And, you don't have to be an analytics guy to know, hey, what they're doing now it's not going to last. It's going to be impossible for Carter Hart to, maintain a 945, 946 save percentage throughout the course of a season. Felix Sandstrom's going to have to play in a lot of these nights in back-to-backs. And then so you add in, and here's the interesting part to me, because if you listen to Tortorella after games, and I'm sure some of it is him sticking up for his guys too, the Flyers are playing still decently, but they're beating themselves with the special teams. Power play, not great lately. The PK is just been getting beat up on. They're taking really bad penalties too. Some are questionable, but Torts isn't blaming refs. He's making sure the players are still held accountable, because I think once you start passing blame, It gives them an excuse. He's not giving them any excuses, which I like. He's holding the team accountable. Don't take stupid penalties. The law and slash comes to mind. Like, there's no need. And then obviously the goaltending. So you add in, poor special teams, goaltending. You mentioned face-offs against Dallas last night. That was just if they didn't beat Ottawa the night before, you were looking at a 3-game losing streak because, Dallas is a strong team. They're good. Peter DeBoer's got them playing good hockey. And they're a team that the Flyers were going to have trouble with. I guess on a plus side, because right now the Flyers are 0-4 in back-to-backs. The Flyers don't have another back-to-back game until just after Thanksgiving, November 25th and 26th. So they have 2 weeks to avoid a back-to-back. They're getting beat up on the second game of back-to-backs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you covered that real well. Chef?
I want to even elaborate even more. I think if we examine the first 10 games of the season, and I think Jim will pretty much agree, when they had their chances, they were getting outshot. They were getting a lot of times outplayed in the first 10 games. But more importantly, they did this. When they had that chance to really capitalize on a mistake that the opposing team made, they did it. They had those chances. But it was a turnover inside the blue line, turnaround shot. It was a goal. It was, or they capitalized on that, I think. Now, if you look at these last couple games, it's basically when they made mistakes, even in games where they played pretty good in, they made their mistakes. And we, talking about that area, I know other podcasts have talked about it, that area right around the blue line on either side. And it was those mistakes that are made there are pretty much what's, you get those. That's what's killing them. Other teams are now doing it to the Flyers. They're capitalizing when the Flyers make those mistakes. They're really making them play, even though they're on some games you might see it might be a little lopsided or something. They played well, or thought they played enough to win. It's just those 4 mistakes ended up being 4 goals, and then and then you pull your goalie and they're getting an empty netter on it. It's making it look even worse than it really is. But I think you could even add that on to what Jim has just said. I think it's more than just one little thing. It's multiple layers of things. But on the other hand, they're playing. The drive is there. Mm-hmm. The team is playing like a team. When they mess up, they're messing up as a team, and they're taking it as a team, and they're playing. Now, before they and I think I said it last week or the week before, I look at this team now and I see a little more self-respect. When they make that mistake, before it was heads down and they were pouting and feeling bad for themselves. When they make that mistake now, and you'll see Braun, when it bounced off of him, that puck off his junk that went in for a goal the other night, it bounced. He was mad. It wasn't like, I can't believe that happened. You saw his face. He was frowning. He's like, I'm mad that happened. Whereas before, this team would have sulked. And I'm saying Braun because he was one of those people that called out other players in the past as being soft. So for him to get mad and for him to show it, I think that's a good trend all around. When Konecny made a mistake, he was mad. Before, he would just complain and cry. Now I see a different mindset in this team. And I think overall that's, I don't think our position has changed on this team, the outlook of this team. It's still the same thing. This is still going to be a sub-500 team. It's just going to be a sub-500 team that's going to be in games a lot longer than they should be because of their work ethic, because of their attitude, and their coach. And by the end of the season, by God, it's going to be probably their conditioning too.
Yeah, and Jim, just pulling some threads out of that. One thing, because I missed some of the games with the move and some of the connection issues I've had, but I saw a good part of the Columbus game. Now, they lost that game, I think it was like 5-2 at the end of the day, and there were some empty net goals in there, but I was watching the team and they were busy. I mean, they were intense. They were competing. And I think that kind of speaks to what Chef is talking about in terms of if at the end of the day, the end of the season, this is like the new Flyers, and all you're adding, the work ethic and the so-called standard that they talk about has now been installed. And now it's just a matter of adding talent and maybe another GM. But I mean, I had to throw that in. Then mission accomplished for this season.
Yeah, I would have. That's why I'm watching, for the exact reasons you just said.
Yeah.
You want to see resilience in the team. You want to see some sandpaper, some self-respect was, I think, what you said there. And it's true, because let's face it, this team's not going to win a lot of games, but you can lose and still feel good about, you're not going to win the Stanley Cup this year. So, okay, what are the goals? Right? It's to establish better habits, to change the way you think, become a little bit more tougher mentally, create bonds with teammates. Hey, a team that plays as a team will beat a team with talent that doesn't play as a team. And I think you saw that in the beginning of the year a little bit there. I'll be honest. I saw this week St. Louis, Columbus, Ottawa, Dallas. I saw the schedule and I'm like, hey, you know what? The Flyers could win 3 out of 4 this week. I was a little disappointed of how this week went, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
They started out, they beat St. Louis, and they looked great, by the way. They beat St. Louis 5-1. I know it was the second game of a back-to-back for St. Louis, but that's okay. I was disappointed that they lost to Columbus. That was a big game for the Flyers. Tortorella's first game back in Columbus, and they lost. He was disappointed. He was a little bit angry after that one. You may have heard he didn't show up for the media afterwards. We don't know why. If I was going to assume, I would assume this is a man that knows himself. He was probably pissed, would have said some things maybe he didn't want to say after the game and chose to skip it. I would have been pissed too if I was him. The team didn't come through for him. And then they come home Saturday and they lose to Ottawa and they beat themselves again. And that was another game. I wanted them to beat Claude Giroux. I liked him while he was here, not on the Flyers anymore. He comes back, you have to beat him, and they didn't. So I was a little bit let down. And then I would have given him the loss to Dallas the next day. So I was a little disappointed they went 1-3, even though they're not supposed to win every game. I expected more. They could have beaten Columbus at least.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the mistakes are now costing them, where, like Chef said earlier, it's them suffering that fate. And plus, while they still have way better than league average goaltending, I think league average is like 901 or something. They're still at 920 because of what Carter Hart paced out in the very beginning. But if now it's evening out, because now they can't win a faceoff at a critical moment or to turn the puck over. And I think Jason Martinez is calling it like that 10-foot, area around the blue lines, a gray zone, they were calling it, I think. So, those kind of things are now coming back to haunt them, where before they were getting away with it because they were getting 945 goaltending. It's just not going to last, but look, we understand that. So, just reviewing a couple things here. So, just the numbers themselves. The Flyers are 922. I'm looking it up now. Save percentage as a team, but they're like second to last in the league in goals for. I think only St. Louis is lower. It's like 2.67 goals per game or something like that. I could be wrong, but that's off the top of my head. I heard. So that's one thing. And then if you look at like their analytics and things like that, there's no, 7-6-2. You really got to be happy. It's just when you have a game like San Jose, and yesterday was kind of like not really a great effort. And they lose versus Dallas, but really like the key moment in that game was, I think the big disappointment is that Hart didn't play against Ottinger, like the two hottest goalies in the league. That was, I don't know, it was a little mind game with Torts, or he just felt like we can beat Ottawa. We got a better chance. I want him playing against Ottawa. So he's going for the W's. But the thing was, when Luke Glendening in the first minute of that third period scores that shorthanded goal with that giveaway, that's when you saw a little bit of that pouting and quit and head down kind of thing. But other than that, and the San Jose game, it hasn't been that way. So it doesn't take right away. Sometimes you're going to fall back into that when you have repeated failure. And now, they've lost 3 in a row. And it's now is a test. Now, this is why, Jim, you were talking about it. It's like, this is why Torch comes out and says, I like our effort. I'm going to stand by these guys, and I don't give a bleep what anybody else has to say, because he doesn't want them sulking. He doesn't want to get back in that habit. And really, Jim, wasn't that the calling card. As much as we love G and Jake and all that, outside of Simmer, Simmer didn't waste his time with that. But like Simmer, G, and even Coots to some degree would start this complaining and all this kind of thing. And that is what he's trying to breathe them out of.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not going to come on your show and say anything negative about the past leadership group, but if anyone listens to mine, I think they kind of know how I feel about those guys. I wasn't the biggest Jake Voracek fan. Hey, you can have all the skill in the world. That doesn't make you a good leader. And, I'm sure those guys were great. I'm sure they got along with everybody. I'm sure the ways they thought they were creating camaraderie and, making a team of what they were. I'm sure they thought they were doing the right things, but they didn't have somebody to tell them this is not how things are supposed to be. So, Torts comes in, the team's a little different. There's nobody to really push back because all the old leadership's gone, which is, what you need, by the way. When you bring in a new coach, you can't really have any of the old generals kind of hanging around, because it's going to be tough to change. I said to my guys last year, and they all called me crazy. I said, this team will be better once Claude Giroux is gone. And talent-wise, obviously not. But as a team, what you're doing is you're allowing guys to step up into leadership roles. And guys like Ivan Provorov have said this the last couple months. I had the opportunity to speak to Travis Konechny a couple weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, what's it like without Claude Giroux in camp? Like, is it noticeable? And he said, well, he's been gone for months. Like, we don't even think about Claude Giroux anymore. And I said,
that's a good thing.
Yeah. And you can see it because he's matured. He's maturing right before our eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was a little bit surprised that I was taken back a little bit that he said that, because I was expecting more of a kiddie kind of answer, like to go into the question kind of thing. And so I asked him, I said, okay, well, do you guys know that there's a void? Does it feel like there's a void, a leadership void, or an opportunity for some of the younger guys to step into? And he looked at me and he said, it was a short but sweet answer. He said, absolutely. He said, there's opportunity for us to move into a leadership role, and guys are taking that on. I was taken back by that, because I'm like, oh, okay, Travis, like, didn't expect that from Travis Konechny, and he's backing it up, which is a surprise to all of us, at least to me, because, people were, remember before the season, if you were taking bets on who's Tort's going to bench first, or who's going to, watch the game in the press box first, a lot of people were putting money on TK. The complete opposite. He's taken off under Tortorella. You love to see it.
Yeah. And you know what? Guys like, I know Jake has been going a couple of years, but in a way, there's only so much air in the room. And I think when G left, I think TK said this could go either one of two directions. Either I could continue down the path I've been going, or I got a family now. He's got a baby. He's kind of just maturing right before our eyes. He's becoming clearly the most consistent player. And just one thing before I get to you, Chef. Here's an example of the old leadership group. Fair or unfair? Actions speak louder than words, and words describing actions. Keith Yandel talked about his time in Philly and what a great time he had last year. And in such a piss-poor season, Yandel's already checked out. Like, probably like 10 games into the year, he's got his golf game going. He knows he's retiring. All he cares about his record, right? So that attitude is so far from where they're at now, and that is progress. Chef?
No, I want to say, if we're going to talk about leadership, I think really a popular misconception, and I think we can all point to different players on this team over the years, through the years, I should say. It's not always been the best player does not always have to be the best leader on his team, the captain on this team. I think we're seeing it evolving right now. If you looked at that team and whose team is it right now, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, Coots is going to be captain when he comes back, if he comes back. And I'm like, I don't know. I see when stuff happens, everybody is looking. If you're looking at what's not going on, sometimes I like to watch what goes on away from the puck, away from the play. And I see, and I'm taking a look. And you see when people go back to the bench after a good shift or a bad shift, and you look on that bench, they all look to Laughton. There's people looking down the bench at Laughton leaning forward, and he's going like he's signaling. And other players, these other players like TK and I want to say Kevin Hayes to an extent. I don't see it as much from him, but
no, it's Laughton and TK. You're right.
Yeah. So I'm like, I just see these guys, and I wouldn't say TK is a captain of this team. I look at this team, and this leader is obviously Scott Laughton. And I wouldn't call him the most skilled player on the team or the best player on the team, but sometimes it's the best who owns a room. You know how some people have that presence, that room presence, and I think that's so important. Like I was on a radio show before, and my biggest debate with them was when you're looking at a team, sometimes I think you underestimate who that rah-rah player is or who's that player that owns the room. Because when he speaks, everybody listens, whether it be Kurt Schilling on the Phillies when he would say something or somewhere along the line. That's the first one that popped into my head. But I know it's not hockey, but I'm just saying characters through the years who own a room. And I think that if you look at Scott Laughton now, I think he owns this room. I think he's the one that's making this team go right now. And when he has a great game, the team just feeds off of it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you look at Columbus. Columbus is Johnny Gaudreau, Patrick Laine. Who's their captain? Boone Jenner, a blood and guts kind of player.
Yep.
Because he exemplifies the way the Blue Jackets want to play, want to approach each game in terms of competitiveness and all that. No, they're not the greatest team, but I think Scott Laughton is this team's Boone Jenner. And it's probably very comparable in talent. So
now I would say this too. I mean, if you look back on previous Flyer captains, I know it's kind of like, but I grew up. My first experience was post Bobby Clark. I guess my real memories when I was into it. Davey Pullen and Keith Primo were the captains at one point. Kevin Dineen too wasn't necessarily a great captain, but I'm just saying these are guys that maybe they weren't the best players on their team, but they were. Primo, I would say, was a very underrated captain during his tenure here. But Davey Pullen was one of those guys that everybody looked up to, and he was. If I think captain of the Flyers, I automatically go to Davey Pullen. I don't go to Clarkie. I don't know why, but because I think it was just too easy for Clark because he was that good. Davey Pullen earned everything he got, and I think that's an integral part of it too. You need somebody that's going to be willing to go out there and earn everything.
Yeah, and the other part, I mean, even when Clark gave up the title of captain for a brief period, and we're going back here, because he was like an assistant coach, it went to Mel Bridgman. I can tell you Mel Bridgman was not the best player on the Flyers when they went to the Cup final in 80. I mean, they still had Barber and McLeish and Leach and guys like that. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's overrated to some degree with like captain, but it's really not overrated in terms of the leadership group and creating expectations for the group as liaison for what the coach and what they're trying to do. So I think that's, where we're at right now in terms of what the team has been through. I mean, Tippett is a guy, Jim. He's an interesting guy. It's kind of coming together. If you think about it, he now has replaced Voracek as their best zone entry guy. He skates better than any of us imagined when we acquired him. And even more so, I'm seeing that this year. And we're seeing it more defensively, too. He has better vision than we imagined, right? Okay, as a playmaker, and he's deft, very soft hands. He comes in with the reputation as a shooter, and that's like the one thing he's not really doing that great. But it seems like it's kind of coming together, and it's just a matter of time he crosses that finish line when the goal totals.
Yeah, so Tippett he's if you're looking for positives and reasons to watch the Flyers this year, Owen Tippett is starting to look like one of those guys, right? Like, because why are we watching this year? We're watching for next year. Who's going to be on this team next year? Who's going to be on this team beyond next year? Who are the pieces to this team moving forward? And I think a lot of us are hoping for Owen Tippett because he was the guy they got back in the Claude Giroux trade. It seemed underwhelming at the time, but if Owen Tippett can continue playing like this, I would say, yeah, absolutely pleasant surprise, averaging over 16 minutes of ice time. I think he's playing with Hayes and Konechny these days, which, they only scored 1 goal yesterday, but I believe he was involved in it. And, it looks like there's some chemistry there. So I'm never going to be one of those guys to poo-poo somebody when, they're playing well. And, Owen Tippett, six points in 10 games. I hope it continues. I hope we see some career highs this year out of Owen Tippett, even if it's, 2020 or something like that, 20 goals, 20 assists, something to build on for next season. Give us a reason to say, okay, Owen Tippett's one of those guys that we can work with, So yeah, it's good stuff. And I hope it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the point. This is a weeding out process. That's something Charlie O'Connor was talking about when somebody asked, like they're a new fan of the game. It's just on Twitter tonight, actually. Well, what am I looking for the Flyers? And he talked about this is the year that Tortorella kind of decides who's part of the future. Like you said, I'm not going to repeat what you said, but you couldn't put it any better. And that's what it's all about. And having gone through so many seasons watching the team, it's fun watching some of those seeds germinate and grow. And then it's like the next year, it starts going some places. I could take that in a lot of different directions from the different teams I've watched. I mean, 08 from after 07, when all those moves were made, or like maybe the most comparable year, even though the talent level isn't anywhere near as great, is when the Flyers traded Darryl Sittler. Okay, that was a big loss going into the 84-85 season. But all these young guys that got together and, they had a lot of talent, but they didn't know at the time from that perspective that guys like Tocchet and Derek Smith and Zezel, and they just acquired Murray Craven, and you already had Mark Howe and all that. But and of course we had Pelle Lindbergh, so we got Carter Hart. So there's hopefully some kind of parallel there, because that's really probably the closest parallel that I've seen in terms of counting on either young talent or young veteran talent that hasn't quite made it to that point. And Chef, you kind of remember those teams. And do you see any of that in this group as things are coming together? And, Mike Keenan was a real martinet as a coach, very comparable to Tortorella, who's, a softie compared to Keenan back in 1984. That's for sure.
That's true. It was a different era. You spoke to people in let's say a completely different manner back then. I'll say this. I mean, when I go back to those years, I remember my mom was the one that got us into hockey in the house. She was a big Flyers fan. And back then it was all on PHL 17. Most of the games, it was on free TV way back then. And then it got switched to Prism way back when. And then my mom's told my dad, we need to get Prism. My dad didn't want to pay for cable. And we're like, well, we ain't going to watch any Flyers game. We got to get it. So, of course, my dad relented. And I just remember watching those games going, hearing my mom yelling, hit him, hit him, hit him. And that was during that era, there was it was like almost the same thing. They didn't win stuff right away, but they were at least fun to watch. And this team, the comparison I draw now between that team, yes, a lot of young players, a lot of inexperience, but guess what? The games, I mean, they're going to end up having close to the same record as last year, maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse. But guess what? I'm watching the games this year. It's not a chore this year. It's actually entertaining to watch the games because you never know. Okay, are they gonna capitalize on those 3 or 4 mistakes and all of a sudden run the score up to 6-2? And you're like, geez, I can't believe they just did that to Stanley Cup champions, defending champions, that kind of stuff. Because you never know. Because they're like that Christmas present that isn't unwrapped yet. You don't know what you got yet. It's Schrodinger's Flyers. That's it. They're both a great team and a bad team at this point because you don't have a big enough sample size to tell what they are. And until that happens, you don't know. So, well, I guess that's it.
There you go. Hey, let's talk about some injury updates. I'd like to thank Anthony Sanfilippo from broadcasting this on the Stick to Hockey podcast. So if you didn't catch it, we'll give you some updates that he talked about. Just want to give him some attribution. So Couturier looks like he's probably out for the year unless they really feel very confident that he'll be okay to play, and they don't want him to go almost 2 years without playing. But probably more than likely, either that or the Flyers surprise and they're in a playoff hunt, and they really don't think they're risking anything. I don't see that as a scenario that's very likely. Now, what is going on with Cam Atkinson? Apparently, it's something to do with a torn labrum or something of that ilk, something to do with the rotator cuff in the shoulder, and they've chosen a conservative route. And they're sticking with that for now. It could end up being surgery. And if you're talking about a labrum where you got to really, you got to shave the bone if you have a spur and you got to repair the labrum, that's multiple months. And in hockey, that's a lot, But so we don't know that yet. It's still up in the air. The conservative non-surgical approach is the one we're going with. And again, ASF with that kind of information there. Now, in terms of Wade Allison, it looked like something that would keep him out a month or maybe months. It apparently is not quite at that level. It looks like it's probably weeks, and it's maybe not the injury you thought it was. So I'm just passing along information that I heard on that. It just seemed
it still is classified as a lower body, right?
Yeah, lower body could include core, and core could mean mid body. But I never hear him say mid body. I never hear that one. He got mid body. You know what? You could have fun with that one. So I could see why they go upper and lower.
From the boobies down, let's say. All
right. So Jim, let's talk about a couple players that people are speculating upon. Let's get the easy one out first. Bellows. Kiefer Bellows. I either think of Kiefer Sutherland or Brian Bellows. Brian Bellows is a terrific player who was supposed to be generational, but he was only a multi-time All-Star. Just a big letdown. No, he was a really great player, and Kiefer he's not a good skater. And he just when you think, hey, he's on to something that was a good shift, and it's not there. He can't get from point A to point B, it seems, and it's really impacted his game. And you can't get your shot off if you can't get to the spot you need to get to.
Yeah, I was glad that they took a shot on him. Former first-round pick. Flyers had guys going down left and right with the injury, and it's kind of like one of those years where you can take a shot. This guy's on waiver. Like they went out and got Sedlak, who's been playing very well, I think, for the Flyers in the situations that he's been put in. So why not take a shot on Kiefer Bellows and see what you can work out with them. I haven't watched him play all that much. I think he's been a scratch. He played yesterday. He will play now, right?
Yeah, because Allison's out. And he played yesterday. And Steve Coates, who I was listening because unfortunately I did not get a chance to watch it because of connection issues here. But I heard him talk about Bellows. Has he even played today? And then, that was a good shift by Bellows. But see, that's kind of like, but I already had that impression before Coates chimed in with his wisdom. And he's an entertaining listener, I'll tell you that. So Bellows is frustrating because I watched his father and remember what a good player he was. And even though he never lived up to the hype was ridiculous. He was a really good player. And it's really unfair, because Kiefer it's the skating, man. It always comes back to that.
I'm hoping they figure something out with them, right? They have all year. I don't think there's any reason to make any rash decisions or whatever. I think, there's no risk and all the reward. If he doesn't work out, see you later. If he does work out, all right, maybe it's somebody that can contend for a roster spot next season, or maybe he pushes somebody else on the team. Who knows? I mean, you only get so many chances in the NHL. I think because he's a first-round pick, he'll probably get one or two, but we'll see. They have, 65 some odd games left this year. Let's see what Kiefer can do. That's kind of how I am. I'm not closing the book on anybody. Even, guys are getting tired of Morgan Frost again already. And it's like, well, we're 15 games into a season. Let's kind of see what happens here. I know he hasn't scored a point since the second game of the year, but let's pump the brakes a little bit.
I think the most interesting thing, Chef, about Morgan Frost is not so much his play on the ice, but the arguments off the ice from the pundits that talk about, on one hand, his skill package that they see in practice and his poor deployment. And it is something to talk about. His deployment is unusually defensively oriented. But I mean, that's Torts at work. That's the one story. And then the other story is, if he's a good scorer, how come he's not scoring? Like from the Billy Bean Moneyball kind of perspective. If he's a good hitter, how come he doesn't hit? So if he's a good scorer, how come he doesn't score? And my issue with Morgan appears to be he needs more space. He's the anti-Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews trained to play in very tight windows, and he excels in traffic. Morgan Frost kind of crumbles in traffic and has trouble with that. It used to be, I think, the physicality of it, but he's getting better at that. But it's still not working quite well. What are you saying?
Actually, I will say this. His play against the boards is twice as good as it was before. It's not ideal yet, but he's shown a dramatic improvement against the boards. He's actually winning boards, and he's engaging. He's winning those battles and engaging. Whereas before, we'd see him shy away from contact because he felt like – I feel like more so than anything it's more when I see a guy that I know can score like Morgan. Like when he first came up, he had all that confidence. Those first 3 games, he did. He had some. We saw some like, wow, he could be something. That confidence got shattered, torn, burned, set ablaze, everything, nuked, whatever. And now we're just seeing it to come back. But I think the thing is this: unless he sees that shot there, he's not taking it. He's looking for the pass. He's always looking for pass first. And I think a lot of times on this team, I saw Tippett do it several times yesterday too, on yesterday's game, which surprised me because when Tippett shoots, it's out of nowhere. It's already, you don't even see him crank up his stick. It's just all of a sudden it's at the goalie and on the goalie. I think he needs to do that more instead of passing. And I think Morgan Frost needs to not wait for a perfect shot to get the puck on that. Too many times they made that extra pass and then the play was done. They were past the net. They were below the goal line. They passed themselves out of a play. And I think if he can get more pucks on the net, the whole team, matter of fact, you're going to see better chances because that's what it's bound to go in eventually if you keep peppering them. So I think that's his thing. He just needs to have that confidence to shoot the puck.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, at the end of the day, it's a results-oriented business, and it's feast or famine. Oh, he's got a breakaway, and he should be out on every power play. That is one thing people are saying. If he functions well in space, use him in space. And if Tortorella is so, focused on winning, and the talk is that he really thinks he can do more with this team than people think, then Morgan Frost has to be out there taking advantage of that extra space he doesn't get at even strength. But other than that, I mean, guys that generate points, they score. And it's not happening yet. So, yeah, it's 15 games, Jim, but, man, it's tough watching them sometimes.
Yeah, and I know I just said, it's a long season, so take it easy on some guys. But I don't know that I'm a believer in Morgan Frost. There's just it seems like we've been waiting forever. I mean, it's easy to say he's been in the league 4 years. He only played 2 games the 1 year. He's played a total of 91 NHL games, 9 goals, 26 assists. I mean, he was in the league supposedly for his offense and not very offensive results. Yeah. What Torts is doing with him, I don't see as a negative thing, right? And I think the Morgan Frost supporters will use that as a negative to defend Morgan Frost, which I think is unfortunate. I mean, I get that you want to defend your guy, but I see it as Tortorella trusting Morgan Frost, or he wants him to think of the entire season as a practice, basically, right? So he's putting Morgan Frost in a defensive zone position. He wants Morgan Frost to win the face-off as a center, retain possession of the puck, and help exit out of the zone with possession of the puck. That's what a player like him is supposed to do. He wants him to make a play with the puck, get out of the zone, transition into the offensive zone. That's what we all want from Morgan Frost. We know the offensive ability is there. We think we're just not seeing the results. If Morgan can shore up those parts of his game and Tortorella can trust him in these situations, yeah, he's going to reward him with more offensive opportunities, with more offensive zone opportunities. And, sometimes when we get into these debates over players, guys, they'll start pulling up those offensive zone versus defensive zone starts. And reality is a lot of shifts start on the fly in between the zones, and it's like they're somewhat misleading a little bit. But, like I said, it seems like we've been waiting a long time for Morgan Frost to get going. But it's new coach, new responsibilities, is trying to get him to play the right way. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Morgan Frost believer, but I'm going to give him the entire year to see what we have. I mean, we waited this long. They're not winning the cup, so let's see what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing about this year. That's the good news. If you're tired of certain players, just remember who you're dealing with as a coach, knowing that Tortorella has more pull in this organization than Chuck Fletcher at this particular vantage point, from this particular vantage point. And he's really going to decide his future. And by the end of the year, we'll know where we stand. And if he's not getting what he wants from him, he won't be here next year. And we can watch him do whatever with another organization. Chef?
Yeah. Capitalize on that even more. They're not playing for a spot on the team this year. Everybody's playing for a spot on the team next year when things get really interesting, when space gets freed, players get traded, deals get done. It's all going to be about who's left last year. And one last thing on Morgan Frost. I feel like he's like an 80s romantic comedy. He's the girl and we're the guy, and we're trying to catch them all. We want him to do good. We want him this, and then all along the other player that you really should be rooting for is right next to you, and that's how I feel about that. That sums it up best, I think.
Okay, I think that was a very inclusive comment. I think a lot of people were represented in that, and I feel good about that. Yeah, so we're branching out here. We're old guys, but I mean, I like it. I feel good. I feel really good. Let's talk about Rasmus Ristolainen, and comes out and he's having a horrendous year. Now, we were worried that it might have been that he missed that time, in training camp a little bit, but mainly during the season. And his reads are off. He was really horrendous. He wasn't doing anything right. And even when he was getting mad at himself, he was going for hits and, keep getting himself out of position. Like, it sounds like the rest of Ristolainen I've been watching most of his career. But, yeah, he got called out by Torts, and it improved. But, Jim, I mean, it's almost like Tortorella pulled the cover off of this whole thing with Ristolainen. And it's like, it's if Tortorella was a coach last year for whatever, how that could have happened, Risto's not re-signed, because he would have just said, nah. I mean, I love the tool set and package and all that, but you got, like Tort said, you got to stop plays. That's your number one job, is to stop plays in defensive zone and head things the other way. It's like, that's my job. His play reflects that. It's like the first time he's ever been asked to do that.
I mean, you're 6'4", you're 220, and you're known for playing physical. You would think that shutting down plays in the offensive zone would be something that you would be good at. Like that's your forte. Like pucks in the corner, you eliminate any chance the offense has of getting the puck. You get the puck out of the corner, boom, you're going the other way. I think Torts is trying to make Ristolainen better at that. I'll be honest, Ristolainen is not a player that I was really crazy for either. Like, if he's not playing physical, what exactly does he do? I don't know if he was worth his contract. I don't know if he was worth what they gave up for him. But like, this is all, it's all in the past now. There's no reason to talk about that. So I don't even know why I'm bringing it up. He just is what he is now, and I don't know if he's a guy that Torts can change. 28 years old. I thought it was interesting. Well, I don't know. I heard something. I heard the reason why Torts didn't show up to that news conference the other night after Columbus was there was something between he and Chuck. And So here's my assumption is, like, what's this roster I have to work with? Like, for example, you signed a guy like Ristolainen for 5 more years. What am I supposed to do with this guy? Like, he's playing 16 minutes a night the last 4 games. He played 13 minutes against Dallas, and I know he was hurt. So my assumption was, okay, this guy's conditioning is not where it needs to be. Torts squashed that instantly. He said it's not the conditioning. He just needs to play better. He needs to play smarter. I don't know. I'm not a Ristolainen guy, so it's tough for me to be positive with Ristolainen, to tell you the truth.
No, and look, to me, it's a thorn in my side that they gave up the first-round draft pick. They saw him play last year. They seem to have somewhat of a positive effect with Sanheim, but nothing I wanted to invest in. And then, right-handed defenseman, every organization sees a guy like that with that tool set and figures, well, there's a first-round draft pick opportunity at a time. They got 61 points. Even though it wasn't the greatest draft, I wouldn't have minded another shot at a Cutter Gauthier kind of level player. Maybe it would have been with a contender, so maybe it would have been in the 20s. But, a first-round draft pick, you don't know. Pasternak was drafted around that position in the drafts. You just don't know. You got to run with that. And the problem with Ristolainen, like a lot of defensemen, I've mentioned this before on our show, Jim, you have this group of defensemen that the organization blew it with development. I think of guys like Luke Shen, Lucas Spiza, even Tyler Myers, when he came into the league, had a great rookie year. Shen had a great rookie year. And it was Zach Bogosian in that 08 class. And you contrast that with Pietrangelo in St. Louis, where they were more patient with him, right? And he took a couple years. And he developed. St. Louis did a much better job. Now, whether Ristolainen would have been that much better, he wouldn't be. I bet you had they been more patient with him, and him coming from Europe, he could have gone into the AHL instead of just throwing him out there and hoping against hope he'll develop, quote unquote. And, he would have known the game a lot better. He would have taken his time. So I think he's beyond that. I don't, there is always exceptions to that. And guys like Shannon Bogosian have been like number 6 defenseman and cup winners. That's great. But that's about all you're going to get, Chef.
I think, let me go with this. When he first came here, it was like a shiny new toy because he hit. And we haven't had guys that had that spunk in them in a while. The last, core of players that we just picked up are gone. They're gone now. So he's the remnant of what happened. Do I think that he can be saved? I think there's a chance that if anybody's going to get through to him, it's going to be Torts. It's going to be
and
somebody.
Brad Shaw too. Good Brad Shaw.
Yeah,
like
about both of them. Yeah, it's going to be. So I think there's salvation. So now, looking ahead to the next couple of years and his contract, I don't think it's the worst contract in the world that you'll be able to move later on in a year or two when the cap goes up. All right? I think it's going to look like an okay deal down the road. This team isn't ready to win yet. I know that. I'm not trying to say it's a great deal in 2 years, but it's a movable contract in 2 years if it doesn't work out, if he doesn't reach his potential to where he should be. I'm looking at it like that. I think his biggest problem right now in his last couple games now is he over tries. He's making hits, and when he makes these hits, they are big hits, but you've totally taken yourself out of the play and left your defenseman, your pair, hang out to dry with 2 guys in front of net when you should have just let the play go to the good corner, stay in your spot, and have that support and let the forward drop down like he's supposed to. But, that's just me. But I just say it's a salvageable situation, if not this year, within the next 2 years, at least, if he doesn't improve.
Well, if I was the GM, I'd be giving it this year, and that's about it. That's all I got time for myself. I mean, that's
we're barely giving the GM this year too. So let's talk about that. That's why I'm saying, every new broom sweeps clean. Like with the players got moved out, so now you have a new GM, and to even expand on that, I guess is now you have a new GM who's going to probably want at least 6 months to see what it looks like, what it really is for himself. And then you start moving people at the deadline next year, and that's where I think he could go then.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. It's the Flyers still have some moving pieces. Tortorella has been a constant, and like a lot of times, even when they lose, Jim, I mean, it's like, well, a tough game, whatever. Even if it's a bad game like San Jose, you still want to stay tuned and watch at least the post game with Torts, because I mean that's part of the charm too. And I look forward to the time when they're a winning team and all that. But at least that's like a small consolation, but a consolation nonetheless.
Yeah, and you know what I love the most about him is nothing wrong with Flyers media, and there's a lot of very smart people in Flyers media, and a lot of great journalists. But if he disagrees, he'll just flat out tell you, and I appreciate that, because some of the guys get too caught up, I think, in the analytical numbers, and they forget that the Flyers are not the most talented team in the NHL. They're a team with a new coach. They're learning. They're getting their brains rewired, whether they realize it or not. Like, you're going to regress a little bit before you get better. And so when some of these guys asked, I forget who exactly it was, but the analytical numbers will say one thing, and it says the Flyers played a bad game, and he'll come out and say, I disagree with everything you just said. What he was looking for was there. He was looking for effort. He knows they're going to lose the analytical battle. He knows they're not going to have the puck more than the other team. He knows they're, on most nights, they're going to get outshot. He knows that, but he doesn't want to see them quit. If they're going to, it doesn't matter how you get 2 points, right? As long as you get the 2 points, and the analytics stuff, he knows, he's not ignorant to analytics. I think he'll troll the media a little bit, but he pays attention to that stuff. I mean, this guy's evolved. He might be one of the most evolved coaches, at least in my era of watching hockey. Because we all know how he was 20 years ago, and we all heard the things that were said when the Flyers hired him. He's a dinosaur, this and that. This is a people person first and foremost now, and then he's a coach. And I'm not sure a lot of people understand that when they ask him questions, and it annoys him a little bit, I think. So yeah, it's fun to watch him talk to media after games. If he disagrees, he'll flat out tell you. And I appreciate that, as I'm sure you guys do as well. I mean, all of Philly should. We appreciate honesty, right?
Brutal honesty to me is the absolute best.
Yeah.
Playoffs. That's one of the great lines. I mean, that to me. I mean, even though it never went anywhere with that team, I think that's we love that. When you had those playoffs moments, and speaking of great moments in this town, we're talking about some of the old Flyers and some of those teams. There are 2 Flyers media personalities that are going in the Hockey Hall of Fame, or I don't know if the presentation was this afternoon or it's happening tonight. Bill Clement will receive the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award for outstanding contributions as a hockey broadcaster. Al Morganti covered the Flyers, a great era from 79 to 89, and then went to radio, and he earned the Elmer Ferguson Memorial Award for excellence in hockey journalism. I mean, 79 to 89, that captures that period we were talking about earlier, from the Flyers Cup run in 80 with the 35-game unbeaten streak, all the way through the end of the era with Hextall and Tim Kerr and Poulin and all that. And in 89, that's when Chris Chelios elbowed Brian Propp, and Hextall came and stood up for Propp, because Propp really got nailed. Big cheap shot by Chris Chelios. And so Al covered that. Al was a cool guy. I mean, he's still a cool guy. I ran into him a couple of times, actually. I never met Bill Clement. Chef, I know you have. You got something on that. But yeah, Al's a nice guy, and he did a great job as a writer. He's a really good writer, and he was good on ESPN. Chef, you want to say about some of the times you met Bill Clement?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was on another radio station, with a previous partner. We were talking, and he had a show on the same station. And then one night, we went out to see him at one of his remotes at Chickies and Pete's. I think it was the one on the boulevard in Northeast Philly. And we got to talk to him a couple of times. And then we actually interviewed him on the show. And he was really, really a great speak to, because it was right when he was doing the voiceovers for the NHL games for I guess the EA Sports one. And he was talking, and I was like, I found that the most fascinating part. I was like, I asked him about how, I thought it was going to be like a big, a kind of nonchalant question. Like, what's the difference between recording it, like seeing a live action and then doing your and he was really into it, to doing recording and he thought all the color stuff he was doing for the game. He really enjoyed it. And just talking to him for a good half an hour when he was on his way back from one of the Flyers games on the radio, it was a pleasure. And, we got lucky. I got lucky a lot of times. I met, him, some of that old guard, it's great. Mark Al too, one of those instances too. Got to meet him and Gordy when Gordy was alive too. So it was just, I can't say I haven't been fortunate. I have. So that, yeah.
Yeah. Both those guys are really good at what they did.
And Al Morganti too. My favorite thing from him was the Great Sports Debate. GSD on Prism. That was like the first incarnation of it. That was awesome. I used to watch that on a regular basis, man. It was a couple beer parties in my early 20s to that.
Yeah. That was the beginning of its kind. They have the roundtables now, but that Great Sports Debate. And Jim, some of this is like before, you were watching these guys. Yeah, obviously you heard Clement doing play-by-play locally and nationally. I'm sure you grew up with him and Gary Thorne.
Oh yeah.
Who is one of my all-time favorite announcers. But yeah, it's great that those guys had a chance to do the job that they did and are now getting recognized for it. So just a somber note about Peter McNabb, who passed away after a long illness at the age of 70. I just wanted to, if you have the NHL package and you caught the Colorado Avalanche and their color guy, he was just a terrific, really positive, but just a lot like Gene Hart, in that he informed you or was constantly educating you about the game. And he was a good player. I mean, 6 times he scored 30 or more goals. Twice he got into the 40 category. He was an even better person. And it came across over the air. And it's a shame he passed away. But listen, he got to be on with the Colorado Avalanche through 3 cups in 96, in 2001, and obviously last year in 22. So just wanted to say rest in peace, Peter McNabb, at age 70. Okay, gents, just a couple cleanup things. Cam York dodged a bullet, and we thought he had an injury scare down at Lehigh Valley. And he's okay. In 11 games, he's got 3 goals, 6 assists for 9 points. So he's okay, and that was a little scary. Unlike Allison, if Allison gets hurt, okay, he's hurt, unfortunately. So there's some other stuff I could get into, but the hour is getting late, and we got Jim playing hurt. So, Jim, if you had any final thoughts, wanted to give you the opportunity to do that, and obviously where people can catch your work, your podcast, and all that kind of stuff, contact info.
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me on, guys. It's always fun hanging out. I wish felt a little better this way. Your listeners don't have to hear my hoarse voice for the hour, but I still had fun hanging out with you guys. You can find me on Twitter at Jim Iacovone. If you want to give the podcast account a follow, it's at FlyersHW. And then obviously the playback.tv. I think the Flyers play tomorrow night. So maybe we'll try to do a watch party. If everybody wants to hang out on that, I'll toss out some links later on tonight. Give our site a look, hwhockey.net. All of our episodes and articles show up on there. And I think that's it.
Fantastic. Jim, thanks so much for coming on. Chef?
We forgot to thank everybody that came out to our tailgate. That was part of Nitty Gritty. And that was awesome. It was great to meet a whole bunch of people that you just see on as a what do you call it, as a little hashtag or something on Twitter there. It was great to meet some people in person. Bill Meltzer stopped by. That was awesome. Got to talk to him for a little bit. A lot of other people that, that just pop up on your follows and your likes and actually get to meet people in person. Like I'll throw out one, Raider Frank. He's real. He's a real person. Apparently, there was some discrepancy about that at one point. But yeah, he was nice guy. Talked to him for a little bit. That was great. So yeah, it was awesome. And got to meet some of the writers for that site, and so it was wonderful. It was a great time. So thank you for that. And if you still want to talk to me after meeting me in person, you can reach me at Chef to the Left B on Twitter. That's the letter 2, Chef to Left B.
Yeah, thanks, Chef, for mentioning the Flyers Nitty Gritty tailgate. It looked like you guys had a really good time. It was great that Bill could be there, and Raider Frank turned out to be a real guy. I could have told you that, but yeah, we really do appreciate it. I would have been there, but I was in the middle of a move and actually completed the move. And yeah, someday soon we'll get it together and we'll all be there. I mean, we were at the Steam Pub back in 19 before the pandemic. We had an event and met some folks through Flyers Nitty Gritty. So thanks to Jamie, Yariv, and the crew there. So yeah, you can follow me, Isaiah, at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520 at Isaiah. Don't forget that underscore 520. Yeah, the Flyers do play tomorrow night back in Columbus. And then they play Thursday in Boston, then in Montreal. You hope they can at least grab that game in Montreal. And then they're back home against Calgary on Monday. And we might see you after that. If not, real soon. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We really do appreciate it. And stick to following us on Twitter at O&B Puck. And we'll be back on a regular schedule. So until next time, take care.